Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. I am Howard Walper, president of Alpha Insight, and I'm here with two great guests today, Patrick Reames from ComTech Advisory and Robert Balinski from Enuit. And we're going to have a lightning webinar. It's how to have a successful ETRM implementation. And we're going to go through this really quickly and have 5 tips in 20 minutes flat. So with that, let's call our speakers up here. All right. Well, first, I'd like to introduce Enuit's Vice President of Services, Robert Balinski. How you doing, Robert?
Hey, how's it going, Howard?
Doing great. Doing great. Robert has over 20 years in the energy industry, which includes 15 plus years in software consulting within this business sector. His experience includes managing a middle office risk team for BP's Integrated Supply and Trading Group, leading large-scale consulting engagements as a senior manager for Ernst & Young and Accenture, and managing an IT support team for ABN AMRO Bank. Prior to joining Enuit as Vice President of Services, Robert was Managing Director Services for a large CTRM software vendor, where he successfully led the build-out of their refined products and liquids functionality. Also, a chance to introduce Patrick Reames, who's a founder and Managing Director for ComTech Advisory. Mr. Reames possesses a deep understanding of the energy and commodity markets, developed through hands-on experience and managerial oversight of energy and commodity operations, including exploration, production, gathering, plant, and pipeline operations. Additionally, he has 5 years of energy commodity trading, transportation, and risk management experience with Hess. Now, over the last 15 years or so, he's been focused primarily on information technology serving energy and commodity trading. Prior to founding ComTech Advisory, he led Commodity Point Division of UtiliPoint International, providing expert CTRM market analysis and advisory services to dozens of clients in North America, Europe, and the Asia Pacific region. And I have to say that both of these guys are good friends of Alpha Insight. We've done quite a few things with them at our conferences and at different seminars and webinars. So we got 2 great guys to talk about this particular topic. So with that, I want to say thank you to both of you and turn the floor over to you.
Thanks so much, Howard. I appreciate it. If we could get to the slide deck real quick, I'll just kind of give you a table setting discussion about what we're going to talk about today. One of the things we talk about, or one of the things that has to be considered when you talk about ETRM, CTRM, or commodity management implementations, is they're generally underestimated in terms of the time and complexity and cost that customers are going to experience as they go through these types of implementations. It's hard to really describe to them from a vendor perspective or a third-party solution, third-party consulting perspective, how complex these can be. The complexity of them is really driven by the effort and skills required to fully implement to meet the predefined goals elaborated when the system was initially purchased. Why did you purchase that system? What are you trying to accomplish through the purchase of that system? That can become very complex as you start to think through how to bring that product to life once you do install it. Also, in terms of cost, our ComTech research indicates that most commonly, and there is a wide range here, but implementations will generally cost 1 to 2 times the cost of the initial license. And we're talking about a traditional license. If you're talking about SaaS, monthly, annual type rentals, if it's an annual rental, it may cost as much as 8 to 10 times the annual cost of that to fully implement a product. Now, there are some that clearly can be implemented much shorter than that, depending upon if it's a greenfield implementation. Some can last much longer. We've seen implementations last multiple years and destroy careers, frankly. So it is generally misunderstood when people think about how big and how costly these can be. Additionally, time is another consideration, another dimension to implementations that can really derail these efforts if not fully understood and taken into account up front. There's, again, exceptions, lower, higher, but generally system implementations can last anywhere from 6 months to 1.5 years to fully implement. Referencing again some of the disasters we've seen 3, 4, 5 year implementations and never really have gotten up and running yet. So really, implementation success will always be judged on those 3 criteria. Did it meet the needs of the business when you bought the software? Did it come in on budget? And did it meet the planned timelines? So ensuring success across all these dimensions, and Robert will speak to these things here shortly, really requires proactive communication, coordination, and cooperation amongst all the stakeholders. The steering committee, the executive steering committee that bought the solution, the client implementation team, the vendor implementation team, third-party consultants, and then the project managers that represent each of those respective teams. Next slide. So in terms of how high risk are these, how misunderstood can these be when they first start out? ComTech Analysts did some research several years ago where we looked at 35 different implementations of 18 systems across those 35 customers. And what we found was that fully 27% of those implementations led to poor outcomes. So given that a quarter of them failed to some degree, and again, I would point to some degree, I wouldn't say these have been absolute disasters, but these were considered failed outcomes. That is a high failure rate for these projects of this size, this complexity, and these costs. Again, careers can be destroyed if these things don't go well. And so I suppose it's also not surprising when we ask to describe the experience of implementation, about an equal number, a full quarter said it was bad or terrible. So again, not surprising. Next slide. So the effort and complexity of any implementation is going to vary by customer and by vendor. The system being implemented is one of the key considerations. Every system is different in its implementation complexity, breadth of capabilities, commodity and market coverage. There really is no one-size-fits-all system. I think Robert with Enuit is going to speak to their systems and some of the things that they know relative to that and how to best implement it. Some systems do require a lot of back-end coding. Others require very specific technical skills to do scripting, to develop reports, to establish complex integrations. And when we talk about integrations, I will say that integrations are one of the key downfalls of a lot of these systems. People believe that there is a singular one-size-fits-all SAP implementation or integration, and that's just simply not going to be the case. I know that some vendors have standardized SAP integration tools, but ultimately those things do take a long time to implement. The implementation approach, are you going to phase it in or go to a big bang? The skills, experience, and dedication of the various team members, including the vendor staff, any third-party consultants, internal, external client resources. These things will all affect the effort and complexity. And we could go on and on about all that, but that really does lead us to our topic that we're here today to talk about, and that's really what are the critical success factors when implementing an ETRM, CTRM, or CM solution. And to that, I'm going to turn to Robert, somebody with some very deep experience in this space, has seen multiple different types of systems and been involved in many implementation projects. So Robert, can you speak to that? What are the critical success factors?
Well, I got to tell you, Patrick. First, and thanks for having me on today. So, need to thank you for that one first. But I just want to say the first one is that we've seen across any type of project is commitment from the business and the people who bought the system. The company that is looking to implement the system. What I mean by commitment is that you have dedicated resources that are assigned to the project, and there are resources who truly understand the current business process, the downfalls of what's caused them the pain to want to try, to move on to a new system. And then, with the vision, the internal vision of what do they want to see in the new system. And then most importantly, the time that is given to them by their management team and to allow them to work on the new system. So it's not fair to go and put somebody on an ETRM implementation project and still expect them to do their 40 hours of their regular day job, right? Something's got to give. Unfortunately, if you look back at a lot of the larger system implementations that did not succeed, you end up seeing that you put unrealistic expectations on your internal stakeholders, where you expected them to continue their full-time jobs as at the same time working on the systems implementation, which is, as we all know, is quite involved. I mean, you're gonna be developing a scope, the initial part of the project. You're gonna want to agree upon a set of project deliverables, which, you know, is really important, right? It goes back to thinking about expectations. If you're not on the same page between the vendor, between any SI that's helping out, and most importantly between the customer, you know, you may get to the end and not agree that it was a success because you all had different expectations in mind of what success meant. So agreeing upon those deliverables and the roadmap to get to them is a big part of that. But that, going back to that, that involves people having to spend time on a project and, you know, be able to dedicate their efforts to helping the project succeed. And also, most importantly, you know, you need to staff it with some good, solid people, not just anybody who, you know, you may not know what to do with them in the business, and then you decide, well, go put them and work on the systems project. That's probably not a recipe for success. You really need some people who are leaders in your business, who understand what they want to get out of the new system, and then help the vendor and help the SI, you know, build that kind of bridge to the future of what it's going to look like.
Okay. In terms of kind of that executive commitment, I think that executive commitment can take several different forms. And I think you mentioned in terms of committing resources to the project and the right resources. Have you been involved in projects where you've seen companies totally commit quality resources to the ETRM project, fully dedicated, where they're actually removed from their day-to-day responsibilities?
Yes, I have seen that, and that, you know, that of course that's maybe the utopia, right? I mean, we're realistic, and, you know, in the vendor community, we know that very few people, especially your top performers, are going to be able to step away from their full-time day jobs. But the more time that you could dedicate to the system implementation, the better results you're going to get. So that executive commitment and understanding what that means, and that may even mean that you may have to carry a few extra people on your business side during the implementation, because you need to free up the time of your top people so they could go and work on the project. You know, that I think frequently that's not something that's addressed, and you just try to, you know, go with your current staff, and again, just add hours and add tasks onto their day, and as things drag on, if, you know, as they're prone to doing some of these implementations, if people get burned out and, you know, it starts going off the rails. So if things you could do to avoid that up front is, again, just have that senior management buy-in that this is important to the company. The people who are put on the project see that buy-in from senior management. They recognize that is a critical success factor. It's going to help their career by helping put in the system, and everybody is going to be better off for it, right? Versus somebody buying something and then saying, go deliver this, and come back 12 months later and not know what they're looking at, right?
I also know from our previous conversations that you view data and having clean data as a real key to success in the system.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is there a particular approach that you guys recommend when you implement your products in terms of how to bring that data into the system?
Yeah, so first of all, we like to start with a clean data set. So what that means is, you know, if possible, even before the project starts, you're going to work with your current team to go in and clean out old counterparties, maybe redundant names for counterparties, locations you don't use anymore, pipelines you don't use, things that you really just don't need in the new system, right? Because they're just going to create clutter, and nobody's going to use that data anyway, so why would you want to convert it? Then when we do that and we have that clean data set, we typically like to build scripts that are going to extract the data from the legacy system and run it through our front end GUI. It's almost as if you're doing a regular trade. So that, you know, captures a lot of things, right? By putting it through your GUI, you are, or the front end, you are, you know, keeping it within the rules of your system. You're not putting in something that may not have been, you know, set up in your system, or may not be ready to be put in your system. You're going to identify that if you need new data fields, or if you need any type of tweaking to the deal formulas, for instance, or something like that, you're going to catch it at that point. Where if you just try to load it into the database, again, you're trying to clean it up on the back end. That's not been successful for us. So we also build those scripts rather than a spreadsheet load or something like that, because the scripts are much more repeatable. You know, once you build them and have them working, you know, you may do an initial data load, Then you'll do another one to build a test environment. You'll do another one to build a UAT environment, maybe a training environment down the road, a parallel test environment. So you're going to be reusing these scripts over and over. So the little bit of time and money you invest up front is going to pay off dividends in the end, in efficiencies.
Mm-hmm. I also know that from our previous conversations, you've mentioned training and training as being a key and critical factor to the ongoing success of any system, not only in the implementation itself, but in production use. What's Enuit's approach on training, and what are your recommendations?
Our approach is we try to go with a train the trainer type of methodology, and it's even before official training takes place. We try to identify some subject matter experts from the business side for each particular functional area, whether that be the front office, middle, or accounting or scheduling or what have you, and get them involved in the system, working with the team early on as we configure items in the system, so they're already becoming familiar with how the system flows, how it works. Then as they go through the project and as we get ready to go live a couple months before go live and have the full-blown training sessions, we almost like to run the training sessions in parallel, or say like in partnership with those subject matter experts, because they've already, for most part, know how to use the system. And we'd like to see them almost kind of step up and get their teams in there and do like a little bit of, in classroom training, hands-on, if you will, type of training. But the goal ultimately is to leave the project with leaders from each functional area that people can go to in the future and ask questions of when the SI goes home and when the vendor goes home.
Mm-hmm. So in effect, creating both the super user and the super trainer, if you
the super user does become the super trainer, correct?
Yeah.
And we're not asking somebody to know the whole system, right? If you're in the back office, as long as you're rock solid with all the accounting and back office functions, how the data flows through the system, that's great. Super user, typically a lot of times people think like they could do anything in the system from deal capture all the way through settlement. That's great, but I mean, that's maybe setting the bar a little bit too high for some companies. And we just want to make sure that in each functional area, that by the time we're done, we leave somebody as a go-to person, so that if any internal resources have questions, it's a lot easier to get it answered from them. Or if you got a new hire, you don't have to call out the vendor or an SI to come back and train your new hires, right? You can just ask somebody from within the team.
Yeah. I think we're just about getting close to our 20-minute deadline here, because we want to meet Howard's big buildup. But so if we look back though over the things that we've discussed here, what do you see as the singular most critical success factor? And I think you may have put it that way, but I just want to reiterate it. What do companies need to do to ensure that they are going to have a successful product? What is that one critical factor that needs to be in place?
I think the critical factor is the team that you build to implement the project or implement the software. And that, what I mean by team is, we talked a little bit about the internal team, but that also includes the external team. You want to make sure that the people that either the SI or the vendor are bringing, that they are good, solid people. They have deep knowledge of the system. But your internal team is, going back to that, still very critical, and I think it's one that gets often overlooked. It's many times staffed with people who may not be your top performers, and you just they got some time on their hands, so go put the system in. And I think that commitment from senior management to staff it with good, knowledgeable, solid performers from each of your areas, and giving them the time, carving out some of their regular duties so they have the time to spend on the system, goes a long way towards a successful implementation.
Well, great. I appreciate it. And looks like we are really up against our deadline here, a little bit over, but I think we'll be forgiven for that. So, Robert, I appreciate the conversation with you and your insights. It's been very helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
So that's it for us. Appreciate your attendance and attention here, and I'm going to turn it back to Howard.
Wonderful. Well, great, gentlemen. Thank you, Robert and Patrick. I think that was a fantastic quick overview, and you did keep to your time, even though I'm not the one who came up with that. That was Mr. Treadway in the Enuit office. So with that, thank you for everybody for attending, and we hope to see you back again soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, thanks again, guys.